Welcome to this episode of 10 Minutes with Sam. I'm Akshat Singh. Today, I'm speaking with His Excellency Hans Jacob Frydenlund, the Ambassador of Norway to India and Bhutan. It is lovely to speak with you today, sir.
And thank you for having me, Akshat.
Sir, as we spoke about it earlier, the format of the show is very simple. 10 minutes, 4 questions, and we jump right in. So let me begin by asking you the first question, sir. So what are some of the most pertinent areas of cooperation for Norway with respect to South Asia and with a special emphasis on India, of course?
Yes, I'm ambassador to India, and my job is actually to promote Norwegians' interest in India and with India.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, we live still in a time of globalization, and what we see is that our interests get more and more intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
India is an economic power on the rise, and whatever is the growth now, we have to acknowledge India as a major economic power in the foreseeable future, which is important to Norway to interact with. Norway has a major interest in realizing the sustainable development goals, particularly linked to the oceans, the climate, and environment. And we will not get very far without being able to cooperate closely with India on this. And last is that a part of globalization is also migration. And India, with emphasis on higher education, has been a major contributor of highly qualified labor. Indians are now the biggest non-European work immigrant group in Norway. And we see that you get a number of connections between the countries that you would think about, had contemplated earlier, which make that our integration is far more elaborate than what official statistics show. For instance, when it comes to the cooperation in the IT sector. So, and a small example, in the Arctic, suddenly India has become interested, or India has become more interested in the studies of the Arctic. Why? Because what's happening in the Arctic has influence on what's happening in India, the movements of the monsoons. So we also see an increased interest in what we thought was a sort of interest for us, for geeks up north about Arctic, and suddenly we have a very elaborate cooperation with India on that.
Absolutely, sir, that makes sense. All right, so let's move on to the second question. Sir, since you are responsible for representing Norway in India as well as in Bhutan, could you tell us about the difference between the policy priorities from a Norwegian perspective between those two countries?
Well, first of all, there's of course a question of size. You cannot compare it that way. But he said that we Norwegians tend to have a soft spot for Bhutan. We very early got diplomatic relations with Bhutan, and also being a mountainous country ourselves. There are some quite obvious points of common interest. And Norwegian cooperation with Bhutan for 30 years has been very much linked up to the hydroelectrical sector, which is quite natural, giving the topography of the two countries. So I'm still not accredited to Bhutan because of the pandemic. I'm looking very much forward to go up there and present my credentials to get to know the country better. We have moved forward quite substantially. When it comes to oceans, we have established a task force on the blue economy for sustainable growth, which is the flagship here, where we have been working on a number of sectors, for instance, on marine litter. And which is of extreme importance, particularly when we now start to realize how detrimental the plastic pollution is to world oceans. So we have therefore established a program with India on marine litter. We're moving forward, and again, the marine litter is mostly created on the ground. So we have to look into the climate without preparing and helping create a non-carbon emitting growth, we will get into huge problems when India is growing at the pace it deserves. So working then with technologies to avoid climate change is important. Not just, for instance, taking carbon emissions. We are, for instance, working now very much on cooling technology. Because gases used for cooling, for air conditions, and so on, has a huge greenhouse growth house capacity. So that's a new field of working. That's some of the elements that we are making more concrete. And also returning to the issue of the Arctic, which is a small cooperation, but in its field, it's very important.
Absolutely, Stan. I mean, this is a very, very wide range of activities that Norway seems to be actively working toward. It's also very interesting because I feel that there's an emphasis on innovation, regardless of the field that the country is working on, as you know, has been talked about multiple times in several reports, and that makes the work seem even more interesting. So let me jump to the last question.
May I just add two things here? First, coming also back to the issue of cooperation and the issue of competence and knowledge, is that also as India has chosen a development strategy which is quite unique, we have to point out also importance we have on cooperation on research, which is important, and where we have a number of programs going. And then also come back to the first element you mentioned about democracy and international law. We are now together with India in the Security Council, and one of the important elements there is the cooperation between our two nations in the council, working to promote international peace and prevent conflict. And we have established very good contacts with India. We're quite confident that this cooperation will move forward very constructively in the coming 2 years.
Absolutely, Stan. I mean, we all have our fingers crossed for that. Let's jump to the last question. So we know that Norway is a very important player and has been observing South Asia as a bloc for quite some time. So from a Norwegian perspective purely, what are some of the problems that bind South Asia together and require regional cooperation?
Well, it's the same problems that motivates our India strategy, linked to climate, linked to air pollution, geohazards, integrated ocean management, health, and clean energy. And here I will again point by particular to the issue of marine pollution. Just before the pandemic, we had a visit from our Minister of Environment, Mrs. Sveinung Rotevatn, and one of the major points in his agenda was the work to establish a global agreement on marine litter and plastic pollution. And that without having South Asia in the forefront here, we will have problems. This is problems that straddle nations, straddle continents, and without being able to cooperate closely, we will not solve the problems. And we're not getting these South Asian countries to cooperate together, we will not be able to solve the problems.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you for that answer. This actually brings us to the end of the interview. Once again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to speaking with you sometime soon.
It was a pleasure being here. Thank you very much.